Scott McNair, injury attorneys, we fight for the win.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Overrule Podcast, brought to you by the Scott McNair Law Firm. I'm your co-host, flying solo this afternoon, David McNair, along with a very interesting guest and a good friend of mine that I've developed over the last couple of years in the legal conference circuit. Is that what we should call it, Will? The legal conference circuit?
I think that's what you'd call it.
I think I actually saw you running on the circuit last year, which those who are in the know in the biz would know. I think I saw you running in Park City last week. I was like, I think that's Will before we had run into each other. But Will McCreight with BluShark Digital, who I've met at legal conferences and become a friend of mine, a buddy that we get to run into each other 2, 3, 4 times a year and connect and catch up. Welcome to the Overall Podcast. Thanks for being with us, Will.
Yeah, I appreciate it, David. I'm a huge fan of everything that you've done. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you over these past couple years. That was definitely me going for a run out in Park City. I want to say that would have been after or before I realized that where I was running was unfortunately up a mountain, and that was not at all what I set out to do to myself on that day. So hopefully you didn't see me in too bad of a shape afterwards.
No, I think you were just leaving the resort and you were zooming, so I don't think the altitude had hit you yet.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to vouch for you. I had like a light. I worked out while I was there. I had like a light cardio day, which I'm like, I'm just going to go get 30 minutes at like a 10 incline at 3.5 miles an hour. And like halfway through, I was like gasping. I'm like, oh, I forgot I'm like 7 million feet above sea level. And I'm used to being 7 feet below sea level in New Orleans. So
yeah, well, you can appreciate it. It's something I kind of picked up because at a lot of these conferences, you are in all these super cool places, but you don't always have time to actually explore them. And so it's something I picked up as really a way, outside of a million other different things, but a fun way to actually get to explore some of these cool places that, we find ourselves in. And that's kind of where that started, and not necessarily intending to do mountains with it, but I guess when in Rome or when in Park City.
100%. And as I was telling Miles and messing with you before the show started, you're like, are you 6'5", Will?
I guess if you stuck me up against a ruler, I think it would be 6'6".
6'6".
Something that's really cool when you're playing sports. Definitely not something to complain about, but not nearly as practical of an advantage to have the older I get, I've learned.
Well, I was also thinking about being in Park City, so you're like 8 or 9 inches higher than me as well, and the altitude added, so you're kind of getting screwed on both sides there. But I was hoping you could tell everybody a little bit about you, what you do professionally, how you got there. You're a young guy, so you've been in this professional legal website development and search engine optimization space for maybe 6 years? Yeah,
about 6-7 years. I got my start, obviously, with BluShark Digital, digital marketing agency, specializing in search engine optimization. And, I actually got my start with BluShark as an intern when I was finishing up my senior year of undergrad at American University. So I started out as an intern or fellow, as we referred to it at BluShark. I then stepped into working full-time with BluShark in one of our internal departments. We call it the off-page SEO department, things like backlinks, Google Business Profiles, stuff off of your website. Worked in that department for a couple of years and was able to step into a role as one of our account strategists, where I worked really closely with the firms we partner with, making sure that we were successful in our strategies and kind of growing them. That's where I started to do a little bit of traveling. I think that's probably the role I was in when we first met. It's a role I really enjoyed, and then was able to take that experience and lean into my current position, which is our senior account executive at BluShark, where I'm really just looking at everything that I've done firsthand to make sure that if we are the right fit for a firm, that we have the right strategy in place to be successful, and kind of a long way to get to where I'm at now, but something that I really enjoyed and I think has been valuable to do the day in day out stuff, also work with the firms, and hopefully that has allowed me, from what I believe, to put together strategies that allow us to be successful with BluShark.
Yeah, so let's take it to a granular level, Will. If you're a listener of this show and you're not a law firm, you probably have a lot of lawyers who listen to this, but you're a regular person or you're a different type of industry or business, like what is search engine optimization, or what other people call SEO, generally speaking?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it can mean a whole bunch of different things.
Right?
But essentially,
it gets very complicated.
It does. It's complicated, but it's also very simple at the same time.
Right.
Essentially, what search engine optimization is making sure that if somebody is looking for a solution, whether it be on Google search or nowadays, AI search as well, that you are visible for the things that you want to be visible for. The example I always like to give is, fittingly on this podcast, and speaking to you, David, right? If you were to look for a pizza shop in one of your cities, right, and you hop on Google or any search engine and you type in, pizza shops, right? If you're a pizza shop, you want to be visible for those search terms, and there's a lot of different ways and places that you can be visible there, but essentially it's making sure that you are found on a search engine for the terms that you want to be found for.
Yeah, hopefully for example, if somebody's looking, Miles, you have your phone with you? Will you search pizza lawyer, New Orleans? I want to see if, I hope somebody, if they're searching, hey, who's that pizza lawyer? Because me and you joke, well, we still haven't done a pizza review. We're going to do it in Detroit. We're going to do Detroit-style pizza, hopefully. Who shows up, Miles?
Well, one of the first things is PIZA Law.
Oh, there's a lawyer, PIZA Law LLC in New Orleans. They have SEO. They have SEO hacked us.
Yeah, we call that exact match keywording right there. We may have to get you a new domain.
Yeah, there we go. See, unbelievable. We're figuring out strategies on the fly here, but it's almost like, I think about that movie that I love. With Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, where they're like interns at Google, and they're showing up on the line. How do we get on the line? It's just a great movie for somebody who likes them and dry humor like I do. But it's that whole concept of they're like learning the process of you're helping small and medium-sized businesses appear online and match to consumers who have an intent to find them, right? Consumers are looking for, whether it be a pizza shop, a law firm, something, and they have an intent to search, and you are doing all the work ahead of time for the company to help them be visible when the customer needs them and is looking for them.
Yeah, exactly. I view it as something that's really important to not just, be able to set a firm up with a strategy, but really understand the what needs to go into that strategy in order for it to be successful. A lot of the firms that we work with, are firms, that, range from they're just starting out to even they're more advanced, maybe they're farther along, but regardless, it is a substantial chunk of money at times that's really being spent here. And so, there's an amount of trust that firms place in us, and it's really important to me that we not just bring them on as partners, but we make sure that we deliver upon that trust. And, we're in a position where what we do can be really impactful in helping a firm grow and scale. And I want to make sure that if somebody places their trust in us, they, get the results to justify that trust. And a lot of that starts with making sure that I know exactly what needs to be done to help them get there.
Yeah. So, what are one or two or three things that you think that you see regularly that people don't really understand about what you and people in your industry, competitors and other companies like you do? What are two or three things that you see that they regularly don't understand about search engine optimization? Or it could be like misnomers.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me when I'm talking with somebody, and I still speak with firms who don't have a website, right? So firms who really have nothing.
That's
to firms
unbelievable. Is that still happening?
That still happens. That happens to me. Usually every time I go to a conference, I'll speak to people who don't have a website.
Wow.
And you go from people who really have not done anything, right, even having a website in the past, to firms who have been pretty aggressive with it and do really know a lot of their stuff. I think that one thing that I see pretty commonly is that like we were kind of talking about, the word of like SEO or search engine optimization, it can feel very complicated, and I think sometimes it prevents a lot of people from getting started. And I think one common misconception is
they're do you think it's because they're like intimidated by how much goes, like what's going on is very complicated, and so it scares them, so they run away?
I think that's a part of it. I think oftentimes everybody believes that there are these big players in their market that no matter how much they do, they can't compete with these players, and that's something I'm passionate about. So, one issue I see is that a lot of people, don't necessarily get started at all, or maybe they don't know how to get started. And a lot of the things that you can do here, you can do yourself, right? If you have the time or you're willing to just build out some of the basics, things like a Google Business Profile, for that matter, or things like that. I think an issue that I see pretty frequently with firms who are looking to, really start doing SEO is that they, do some things that are helpful, but without a real strategy or purpose behind it. Rather than throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, I think that oftentimes it's helpful for firms to take a step back and really target their resources in a way where, you're capturing some sort of audience rather than, doing a lot or doing a little for a lot. That's one issue that I see pretty regularly. And then, something that I see with people who work with an agency is they may not be educated on what sort of metrics they should be looking for to actually be successful. One thing about the SEO space is, I'm sure a lot of your listeners maybe are familiar with, and you're probably familiar with yourself, is that it can be a buzzword. And because people don't necessarily know what SEO means, they don't know how to gauge the success of the agency that they're with. Yep. And I think that a little bit of education on, what value you should be able to expect or what, returns can look like can go a long way to allowing these firms to hold their agencies accountable, which is something that doesn't always happen, or even in the opposite, where maybe firms have very, very, for lack of a better word, almost unrealistic expectations. And even though their agency might be performing pretty well for them, if you don't know what some of these expectations could be or should be, that can cause a whole lot of issues in the long term. And, the last thing I'll say is that on that expectations front, search engine optimization is not a short-term play, right? And so if you're looking for something that's, going to get you, super quick results for not a ton of resources or even for a ton of resources, it's important to have the right timeline in mind from an expectation standpoint. Know that this is really an asset that you want to build and see benefit from for the next 5, 10, 15 years, right? And so that's important as well to assess if it's right for you.
What are in that same vein, Will, what are some of the things that you see, one or two things that people who have success with search engine optimization consistently do? And my hunch was it was going to be one of them was going to be the opposite of what you just said, which was that maybe, and I may be wrong, but that one of them is that they just commit. They're like, hey, I know this is a long-term thing, and they keep reinvesting and growing their commitment to their SEO efforts. But I'm curious, what are one or two things you see the ones that really are successful with their SEO efforts in their markets do?
Well, that's a great point. Absolutely, it is a long-term process, right? And the people who see the best results understand that it's a long-term process. I would say that the most impactful thing that I really feel that firms can do on their own to either, best use their time if they're looking to kind of do some search engine optimization themselves, or even really supplement the work that their agency is doing, is really focus on a process to help build Google reviews. Our research has shown that those reviews are extremely impactful from a conversion standpoint. If we lean back on that element of pizza shops, right? And we're looking at the local pack, which for anyone who may not be familiar, if I try and paint a picture for anyone who might be listening through audio, it's essentially those top 3 results where Google shows a little bit of a map pack, and it's usually what people think of when they run a nearby me search. But those elements of reviews are really important to convert upon that visibility. If Google's showing you 3 different options and one pizza shop has 10 reviews, the other has 50 reviews, and one of them has 700 reviews, you're more than likely going to check out that shop that has 700 reviews first. It's just kind of the nature of things. And so, we see very frequently firms who say, hey, I'm the best attorney in the space, right? I have this real reputation. Well, unless you're taking that reputation and you're translating it to digital, someone who doesn't know who you are or who the firms and the reputations they have are in the space, that's not going to translate. So, that's one thing that I think really separates firms who do all right digitally with firms who do really well digitally. And I think the other element is firms who are willing to be strategic and work with their agencies or just be forward thinking as far as what needs to be done to not just be successful now, but be successful down the line. Something I think of off the top of my head is, satellite offices and, establishing different ponds that you can fish in, for lack of a better word, of ways to bring in leads. But also, we're in a world where AI is becoming more and more of a source of traffic for people who are looking for answers, and understanding that just because you're visible right now on a Google search does not necessarily mean that you're going to be visible in ways that people are searching 6 months from now, a year from now, maybe even 3 months from now, right? And so it's always that game of staying proactive. And I think the firms who really do the best, they don't just rely on where they're at now, but they're also looking to be proactive down the line in the future. And that's how you really stay ahead of the competition.
100%. Great feedback. Let's talk about BluShark, not Blue Dolphin, BluShark. Although maybe the dolphin would kill the shark, but that's a discussion for another day. BluShark has been a pretty fast and rapid growing digital SEO company. It's funny. I think the origin of BluShark, right, is Seth Price had a team of people managing Price Benowitz's website, who, for those of you who don't know anything about Seth or Price Benowitz, really big personal injury and criminal defense firm in the general Washington, D.C. market, Virginia market. Great website, really powerful website, and I think BluShark kind of spawned off of that, isn't it? Oh, look, Spawn, another fish and ocean reference. I'm just on a tear today, Will. I think it's both of our dry humors that's really invigorating me. But is that kind of where BluShark started, or?
Yeah, we'll keep it ocean themed. Yeah,
ocean themed.
1,000%. Yeah, we got our start in a funny way, right? Like, we did not start out as an agency. We actually started out as in-house marketing for Price Benowitz in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And the origin of how we grew and scaled is even before BluShark is pretty interesting, where you have Seth and Dave who are the Price and Benowitz behind Price Benowitz, and
now Dave, the official injury lawyers of the Washington Commanders.
They got in at the perfect time.
Thanks to Jaden Daniels. Seth's looking like a pretty smart fucking dude right now. Sorry for the curse word. I threw it out there, but he's looking smart.
Yeah. Shout out to LSU.
Yeah.
So basically, for anybody who knows Seth, he absolutely is like a marketing mind, and he said, hey, I don't really want to focus on trial or cases. I want to focus on growing and scaling the business, and really we leverage digital as a way to scale, the firm from 2 attorneys to 45 attorneys in about the span of a decade.
Amazing.
And then said, hey, I think we're onto something here, right? I think we can help firms nationwide do this as well. So that's where BluShark was born. And the majority of the, department leads for our team actually had, some involvement in that Price Benowitz side of things. But essentially said, hey, I think we can help firms nationwide do this as well. And that's where BluShark was born. We just hit our 10-year mark as an agency. Currently, we've been privileged to, currently work with about 350 so firms nationwide. But it all started based off of, hey, we did this really well for ourselves in a really competitive market. We think we have something that works here, and that's something we're able to help other firms with as well. And it's been a great catalyst and something that we love to highlight, because hey, we did this ourselves. We scaled this ourselves, and it's allowed us to help other firms scale as well throughout the legal sphere in the U.S. and a little bit into Canada as well.
Amazing. About how many employees are at BluShark now?
Oh gosh, I want to say we have probably about 115 U.S. domestic-based employees. Grown very rapidly. When we first started out pre-COVID, like a lot of companies, we were entirely in person, and we were kind of able to use COVID as a spring load to start looking at talent nationwide, and people that we could bring on to get the best of the best, not just in DC, but throughout the country, and something that we were able to use to grow. And about 115 team members, and growing. Number might even be higher, but from my understanding, about 115.
That's amazing. And what is Nalini's job title there? Nalini Prasad.
Nalini's job title is a woman who wears many hats. For anyone who doesn't know Nalini, maybe the smartest person in the space, in my opinion. And she's actually currently Yeah, in a role as our chief strategist. So she is really looking at implementing new case studies, building out those case studies, looking at what's working, trying it out, getting those results so that we can implement them to all the firms that we work with, and traveling to conferences and speaking on these things that we've seen to work. But she's another great example of somebody who started out on one of our internal teams before she started traveling. I don't know if you know this, David, but she also started out as the head of our off-page SEO team.
I did not know that.
So yeah, she started out in a similar way to how I did, and kind of learned things from the ground up, and has really done a great job of helping to lead our team to stay cutting edge with a lot of these new strategies that's happening. Currently doing a lot of research into AI search and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nalini's brilliant, humble, a clear authority on Google and all the things going on in the space. She's also a lot of fun, and my friend, I love her, but I have to just laugh because we follow each other on Instagram, and she travels so much. Like, you get to follow, because she's going to all the conferences like you, right? You get to follow like all of Nalini's travails on United Airlines, between the delays, this crap going on with her kids happened 2 weeks ago, all these things. And poor Nalini was on a European adventure, and she was on Ryanair, and I don't think she liked Ryanair. She wants to be back on you.
Like right now, she might be on a flight.
She might be on Ryanair right now. Rest in peace, Nalini. She does not like Ryanair. She wants to be back to being a United girl, is what
she
I
wants
could.
her first class. I don't know if Ryanair offers first class.
They didn't have pockets in the seats. She was very aghast.
Yeah.
I love you, Nalini. She's the best. I love watching whenever you guys present something, because it's always like Nalini's been in the strategy. You know what I mean? Like, it's very like forward thinking, cutting edge. And she really understands Google at a depth that is very rare to find people understand it at.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. I think that anytime anyone from our team speaks, something that's really important to us is, whether or not you want to work with us or anybody else, or even care about SEO, the best thing that we can do is just allow everybody to take away hopefully one or two things that they can implement themselves, or just like make sure that they leave hearing anyone speak smarter and with more info than they did coming into things. And we don't take the approach of like giving a little bit of a secret or something like that and then keeping the rest. We want everybody to be able to do as well as they can, and hope that comes back around in good karma at some point.
100%, and it does. And you can tell. It's funny you said that, because the last time I saw Nalini speak, I think was at Pilma like 2 months ago, and she started with that comment. She did that, and so it's clearly like a value of y'all's that is important to the organization, about having that type of abundance mindset, growth mindset, and sharing information. There's no secrets, okay? There's no secrets. It's just execution and putting in the work. So I think that speaks a lot of volumes of your organization, that's something that you consistently believe and espouse across all the people that are working at BluShark. Well, let's talk about your superpower. You're a very humble guy, but besides being able to dunk on old ladies in your rec basketball league, what is one of your what is your what is one thing that you think you have a long career ahead of you, a lot of success ahead of you, and a bright future ahead of you, but what is one of the things, like, you've really broken into a space at a young age and really gotten into the space and had a lot of success so far? What do you think is one thing about you that's kind of like a superpower or a unique trait of yours that's helped you succeed?
It's funny that you ask that. Obviously, my height jokingly would be a good one. But I have found a lot of value, and I bet you can appreciate this. We just saw each other a couple days ago at a mastermind, and I think there's a lot of value to just being in rooms with people who are much smarter than you, who have done things that you want to do, and just trying to connect with people, be a fly on the wall, and just put yourself in the right situation. I think that something I try to live by in my life is to just increase the surface area for luck in my life. I think that in anything there's a lot of luck that comes into play, but the more that you can increase your surface area to attract that luck, I think just the more things are naturally going to happen to you. I think that's something that I feel like I'm pretty strong at, and even just connecting with people and being genuine, right? You never know, what you're going to be able to do for somebody, what they might be able to do for you. And I think that ability to connect with people, even if you put yourself in the shoes as a law firm owner, right? Like, make a connection with somebody and, maybe they'll come back, a year from now and they'll have a case for you, right? And so it's being genuine, putting yourself out there. And I think I'm great at just trying new things as well and trying to put myself out there, remain uncomfortable. And, when you become comfortable with that new mark, right, figure out what's the next step for being uncomfortable. So, I don't think it's a superpower by any means, but it's something that I try to live my life by, and I think it's something that you can do on a day in, day out basis.
100%. And it does. I think it's just really good perspective for you as you're advancing in your journey, and I've learned it over the years now. It's like, I think back to Warren Buffett said, we all start lucky. We were born in America. So a lot of opportunities that we have that people who are born in like 90% of the other countries across the world don't have that option. Not that America's perfect by any means, but like luck has so much to do with everything that we do in business. It really does. A lot of this is luck, but you can increase your luck. I love the phrase that you said. I'm going to think about it, about increasing your surface level for luck by being in different rooms and around different people who you can learn from and grow from. So, and to your point, a lot of the things that I'm now doing professionally for the law firm, whether it be in masterminds or in different groups and building relationships, like I think everything starts with relationships in business and it goes from there. I have to return a call after this podcast. I was just like texting this attorney in another state who I just met at a conference 2 months ago. He was asking me some things in the hall. We just got in the chat. Great guy. And he's got a Louisiana car accident case that he wants to refer to us because he knows his client's going to be in good hands. I didn't want anything out of that conversation. I didn't ask for anything out of that conversation. I expected zero out of that conversation. But you know what? It led to a potential case for us, a new potential client, and his client being taken care of, him making a referral fee. It's like a win-win, and it all starts with relationships.
Yeah, I'm preaching to the choir here because you're one of the best at this, right? Like just being a genuine person, like making these connections with people, and you're friendly, you're approachable, you're somebody that everybody's comfortable talking to, whether you're doing that intentionally or not.
I'm not.
Right. But that's how you have the great reputation that you have, and why people are wanting to bring you these cases and refer things over to you. It's because of the connection, as well as the great work that you all do, of course. But it starts with that connection that allows people to maybe understand that great work that you do, or even just become friends with you, right?
Yeah. Well, that means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. Okay, Will, I'm dying to know your answer to this one because we've never talked about this. What is your favorite book? And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a professional book. It could be a comic book. It could be a history book, a fantasy book. Let's go. What is it?
Yeah, it's a book that I read not too long ago that I have really found myself revisiting every once in a while is a book called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I think maybe we talked about this on my podcast, but looking at the story, essentially, for anybody who doesn't know, Shoe Dog is kind of the story of how Phil Knight, grew to, start Nike and kind of the evolutions that company has had. And it's a book I really enjoyed reading because you think of Nike today and you almost, at least for me, I almost, think, Nike has always been this monster, right? Obviously that's not the case, but, all of the things that, Nike went through before they became who they are, and some of the other names that they've had and things like that, it just goes to show you, all of these companies have some sort of story and things that they've overcome to be where they're at. And even some of these monstrous ones, right, they have all faced struggles as well, and they stayed, they continued to persevere through these challenges, and that's how they got to where they're at. And so that's one that I have really enjoyed. Not necessarily a book to give another answer, but similarly, I'm a big podcast guy, and there's a podcast that I love called Founders that I always recommend to people. And basically what this podcast does is it takes biographies and autobiographies and it summarizes them in like 45-minute to an hour episodes. It's a really cool one to scroll through, and it's almost like if you imagined you had your book and you took a highlighter and you went through and you read the book and you highlighted some of these great passages. They kind of read through all the high points of the book and then compare it and say, oh, Phil Knight's journey was really similar to Warren Buffett's in this sense, where they both experience X, Y, Z. I think there's like 500 episodes. You can probably find, episodes about any book that you're interested in, but it's a great way to kind of get an understanding of whether or not you'd like that book before, you commit to reading it.
Yeah, I just followed it now that you said it. It's my number 3 now, behind obviously Overrule with Scott Vignier. What other podcast is there out there? But my number two is we got to get to you.
Okay.
You got a new podcast out. Well, what is the name of the podcast? Hit us with it.
Yeah. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and
of course.
Obviously, super pumped to have you as one of the next guests rolling out here. But my podcast, Legal Currents Podcast, with Will McCreight specifically, something I'm really happy to have been able to launch over these past few weeks. It's been a work in progress for a while now, and it's actually kind of designed to help people with a lot of these things that we're talking about here, where you look at something like search engine optimization and just growing your firm and scaling it. I feel really passionately that just because a firm is starting out and maybe doesn't have a ton of resources does not mean that you can't compete, right, and be strategic. Yep. So really the goal of this podcast is to look at all different types of things that contribute to scaling a firm and just figure out essentially how you can use the 2 most important resources that you have, which are, of course, your dollars, but also your time, right, in as effective of a way as possible. And, what things you can utilize to help make your time as effective as possible and focus it on the things that, you can't outsource, right? And, we've been fortunate to have a lot of great guests that will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks, and really just learning from, not just vendors who are offering something that can help make a process more efficient, but also attorneys like yourself who talk a little bit about their journey growing and scaling, things that they experienced, that they learned that they want other people to be able to benefit from, to minimize that trial and error period as much as possible. And we're in a world where there's so much technology that's coming through that's groundbreaking in the sense of things that have never been able to be possible before, and trying to help people utilize these things to make that process of growth more effective no matter what size they are, because something that I do feel very passionate about is solo, small team, whatever it may be, there are ways that you can compete. You just have to know exactly what those ways are.
Well, I want to go back a bit through the legal currents as a BluShark and and go back to talk about Shoe Dog, which I do love the marketing alliteration of the podcast name because it's kind of like topically connecting to BluShark. I love it. I can tell it was thought out. But Shoe Dog is also my favorite book. And so when you said it, I was like, God.
We must have talked about that.
I don't know that we did, but I'm like, I know I like Will. But I was thinking about Shoe Dog the other day, and I'm like, maybe one of the things that I think makes Shoe Dog such a good book, besides the fact that the writing was excellent and the story is incredible, right? It's like the story of Nike, and it was written, I believe, in a very captivating and engaging way that makes it easy to read and wanting to read the next chapter. It kind of is like it could be many different genres. It's like a business book. It's a historical book. It's sort of a biography of Phil Knight. But last, I'm like, if you didn't know that the story was real, you would think it was fiction.
Yeah.
Because you're like, how did this grow from Nike to the freaking trunk of his car selling these shoes that he was topping off, right? It's an amazing, amazing book. And I could read it. I probably need to reread it. I always recommend it because it's like you can't go wrong with Shoe Dog.
Yeah, the imagery in the beginning, it might be like the opening passage, where he's talking about Phil Knight going out on these runs, and it really paints a cool picture for you, whether you care about that stuff or not. The storytelling's fantastic.
Right. Okay. So last thing I want to talk to you about, Will, before we let you go here is you got a long career ahead. What are some of the goals and things that you're looking forward to with your future in this digital SEO space and where everything's going with AI? Like, what are some of the things you're seeing and some of the things that are excited for your future? Yeah,
I'm excited to continue being able to speak in front of groups and kind of share a lot of these things that I've learned. Continue to try new things like podcasting, right? And get out in front and really help people because I understand that not every single firm out there is going to be able to afford a BluShark or any agency for that matter. But that does not mean that they cannot be helped, right? And that's kind of the purpose of the podcast, right? Is help people out as much as they can and hopefully allow them to learn things like we talked about whenever we're on stage. And so, for me personally, I'm really excited to continue to build my own brand in that way and, connect with people and speak to groups and really just help them as much as, we possibly can, whether it's through us or it's them picking up things that they can learn on their own. As far as like the atmosphere of search engine optimization is concerned, I'm really excited about what AI search is going to do to the space. I think it's a really pivotal place in where we're at right now, and I view it as a big opportunity where firms who are forward thinking as far as what needs to be done in order to be visible through AI search, and there's certainly a lot of overlap, but there's certainly some differences as well. And firms who are really proactive about that have a big opportunity to step in and kind of be the first solutions to this different way that search is concerned. And when you look at firms who have been around for years and years and years, if they aren't necessarily making an effort to be visible here, they may not be able to make that jump. And so I think it's a big point in search where if you are looking ahead towards what needs to be done there, and anybody who tells you they know what needs to be done 6 months from now, you don't really know, right? But that's why it's kind of exciting, because it's a great opportunity to continuously looking ahead and change what needs to be done. And what works 6 months from now might not work 12 months from now, and what works a year from now might not work 2 years from now. But firms who are really focused on making this an effort, I do believe are going to benefit from those changes and really potentially use it to spring load the growth that they're getting, or maintain that large market share if that's where they're already at. But neglecting it is something that more likely than not, in my opinion, is not gonna be a great solution for the firm in the long term.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think the not being in like the technical SEO world or forward thinking just on that in itself is you hit like on a topic that I've really learned a lot about and thought a lot about over the last year or two, which is consistently accepting that you don't know and trying to learn. And I think some people inherently have this skill, but some people who it's an easy one to work on and get good at. But, sitting in some of the rooms that I've sat in with some of the people who are the most successful people in the legal industry, they are constant learners, and they're constantly questioning their own assumptions and questioning the things that they think they know in their own practices and changing them and learning from people who are not at the level that they are. And so you really hit on that, which I think is an important point about being a consistent learner. Like, the world is always changing, and in the digital marketing world of Google, right? Like, Google's pushing updates, like spinning the Leanie's head like every week and a half. So it's like, it's always changing. You got to keep learning if you want to be good at it. And so I think it's just a key thing for people to think about, no matter what industry they're in, is always challenge your assumptions and the things you think you know, and consistently be trying to learn and absorb information.
Yeah, I think, the last piece of advice that I'd give, if we go back to things that, people aren't doing or mistakes that people are making, it is, that they are operating under assumptions of what's working and what isn't. And I think the biggest key to unlocking that is to, understand the data, right? And really track that data, because, that is the key to evolving, to making all these decisions, and not just, being visible or doing whatever you're doing, but making sure that is resulting in the ROI that justifies it being there. And, something that great firms do who really see a lot of growth there is, if they're trying something and it's not working, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't strike through it and reallocate towards things that are working, right? Just continue testing all these things and keeping an open mind as far as what's working, what's not working, and letting that data make your decision. But if you aren't tracking any of that data, then you aren't really able to ever make that informed decision. You're just kind of guessing to the best of your ability, which doesn't mean you'll necessarily be wrong, but when you really are looking to grow and scale, you want to be as reliable as possible with those decisions that you're making.
100%. Well, Will, let's start with the podcast, Legal Currents, I'm assuming you're on everything like Apple, Spotify, all the things, right? If they want to go and follow that.
Yeah, I'm on podcast is out on everything. Rolling out the second episode this afternoon. We're recording this on the second. Episodes are coming out every other week. If you want to, reach out directly, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. William McCreight. I believe it's William on there. Might be Will. I don't know if it's my government name or not. Or you can always reach out to us, BluSharkDigital.com. And ask for Will or ask for anybody. Our whole team's fantastic, and we're more than happy to help. But if nothing else, right, reach out, and I'm more than happy to get you all the information that I can to help you, whether it's with us or whether it's things that you can implement on your own. As we've said a couple times, no, not shy at all to give out information to do whatever we can to help people.
Amazing. Well, Will, I've really enjoyed having you on the show. I can't let you go without explaining the genesis of the Blue Dolphin comment earlier, which is the first time I met Will was at a legal conference in New Orleans, maybe 4 years ago. Man, time's flying. We were at a dinner, and I had maybe just met you right before the dinner, but I was sitting on the other end of the table, and it's these people who I forgot where they're from. I think they were from maybe Nevada, and they're in New Orleans. So you know how people it's like on The Hangover, it's like they just can't take Vegas, right? Like people can't handle New Orleans sometimes. And this sweet lady sitting next to me, and let's just say she had been heavily overserved. We don't have much dram shop liability in Louisiana, so the bartenders slipping those drinks, and the bar's not getting sued. And she just turned to me and she's like, "So do you work with the Blue Dolphin?" Like with a straight face, I was like, "It's Blue Shark." I'm like, "That's the Blue Dolphin." It's like every now and then nobody gets that joke, but I giggle in my head. I think about that sweet lady who had just drank too much that day, and she said Blue Dolphin. I was like, "Well, you were close."
Red Shark, any of that stuff.
Do you get Red Shark?
We've heard Red Shark before. You hear a million different things. It's funny, right? Because you also look at to wrap things up with like a brand like Nike, right? And Nike is the brand that it is because of the reputation that it has, right? But brand like Nike sounds just as funny as any other name until it has the reputation behind it, right? So that stuff is always a work in progress as well.
I wouldn't. I love the story. I think it's funny and anecdotal. And like coming from me, I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars at the firm running TV commercials about people being confused about the name Scott Vignair. So don't take yourself too seriously.
I think I want to say that the name was actually brought to mind at a Blues Sharks NHL game. I believe is the origin of.
Is that the origin at a Blues Sharks NFL game?
It was at a hockey game. I know the Sharks were involved. I gotta think the Blues were the other team there. Maybe not. But
amazing.
Yeah, it was that simple.
Love it. Yeah. Well, Will, it's been a great discussion. Thank you for being my friend. I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'm excited for the podcast that you've got coming out. I'm excited for all the stuff that you've got going on. You're just a great guy. You have a bright future ahead, and you're just a great person in this space. And I'm so glad there are people like you, Seth Nalini, in this space. Y'all are all wonderful people. You're a wonderful company, and I'm excited to get to know you better and see you at more events.
I really appreciate those kind words and echo exactly the same, back at you. It's been fantastic to watch how much you all have grown over the past couple of years and, are continuing to grow and are really spearheading, the space that you all are in. And can't wait for many more beers that we share, many more pizza slices, some pizza reviews in the future.
Pizza review in Detroit is happening.
Yeah. And just watching you all continue to grow, and you're a fantastic friend of mine as well, and it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, and thanks to all of you for listening once again. This has been a great discussion and episode looking at search engine optimization and everything that is the world of Google, the monopoly that keeps on going. This has been an excellent episode of the Overrule Podcast brought to you by the Scott Vignair Law Firm. Thanks to all our listeners. Thanks again to Will McCreight for being here and being an incredible guest. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it.
Scott Vignair, injury attorneys, we fight for the win.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.